Okay, I think we'll get going then. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, Understanding the Impact of Location on Online Sales. I'm Sam Wilcoxon, InSite Consultancy Manager, and I'll be hosting the session today. So in terms of housekeeping, the webinar will be recorded. I'll put everyone on mute, but please feel free to type questions into the chat or to me directly. And if there's time, we'll cover those questions off at the end. Taking the session today is Andy Makelham and Chris Thompson. Andy has been with CACI for 25 years and heads up the InSite Client Services team. He specializes in working directly with clients across all sectors to find solutions to demographic and geographic challenges. As Director of Location Analytics at CACI, Chris is responsible for designing, leading, and delivering analytical solutions to retailers and leisure operators across the world. With this webinar, we will illustrate how we can take CACI research and analysis into how new consumer reality can contribute to the true value of a location and how you can analyze this in InSite. Chris will take you through some of the research that has led to new analytical approaches, and Andy will show you how this approach is implemented in a worked example. This session will be looking at the holistic nature of the customer and the symbiotic relationship between digital and location strategies. So as a few of you will know from joining our previous webinars, we think the best way to start a Friday session is with a video. And this isn't a new topic. So here's a video we created before the pandemic to cover some of the questions and concepts we'll be focusing on today.
Good morning, everyone. Before we get into the main event, I'd like to start with some context for today's webinar. Almost 18 months on from the first national lockdown, we are starting to witness what was once the new consumer reality transition into a new commercial reality. Consumers are now seeking out local centres, independence, and sustainability is top of the agenda as people continue to engage with their local communities. New working patterns have altered local towns and city centres as people look to find balance in their personal and professional lives. Spending habits remain permanently altered as digital technologies now form part of our daily routines, evidenced by an increase in online spend, moving in parallel with a growing desire to find more experience and satisfaction in leisure and recreation. If we focus for a moment on the last point, I think it's fair to say the shift in spending online is here to stay, as well-established digital offers across a range of sectors continue to provide a level of convenience that many people will not want to give up. Whilst online spend as a proportion of total retail sales has fallen slightly from its peak at 36% in January 2021, it's clear that moving forward, stores will get a smaller slice of what is currently a smaller pie. However, it should be pointed out that as physical in-store spend is reduced, the online halo effect is expected to be more pronounced than ever. Now, I'm sure the mythical online halo concept is something you have all heard in many discussions pertaining to retail, consumer behavior, or multi-channel strategies. And at CACI, we've been talking about this for some time in an attempt to move the conversation on regarding the true value of the store. Our view is that stores, in their broadest definition, are far more than a place to transact and purchase goods. as maintaining a strong and engaging high street presence can significantly increase digital sales. In the example chart here, we see in-store spend currently represents around 72% of retail sales. The rest typically is classified as online. However, when we consider click and collect, showrooming, inspired by store, and pure online, we can begin to surmise that over 50% of online spend is influenced by a store, and around 90% of consumer spend is inspired by a store. Before I pass over to Andy, I wanted to finish by moving the conversation on from the more conceptual elements of online halo to the more applied. It's clear to me that the store remains the most powerful way of connecting customers with brand, and it's more than just a place for transactions. More specifically, we are working directly with our clients to calculate online halo by location, format, and store, using our retail catchment models to demonstrate the value a store generates to online sales. We're developing digital-first network strategies that recognize the total contribution of a store. For example, I might accept this store only turns a small profit, knowing its online halo contribution is significant. Using, again, our catchment models and customer segmentations. By understanding the local mission and purpose of the store, we can start to predict format, range, and occasion using demographically coded mobile app data and detailed micro-location information. Some of you might be aware that we've been working with landlords and operators to modernize leasing agreements through a new performance lease model. By integrating our retail models and mobile app data with performance figures, we're able to support each party in agreeing a deal that fairly reflects the true value of the location. As brands start to change the shape of their chain, focusing on the importance of digital, for example, what happens if I open and close in this location, we can also model the impact of that potential risk it might deliver through spatial modeler and InSite. Finally, as brands look to make sense of an ever-evolving market, we're using Acorn-coded transaction data to help quantify local performance across brand, customer, channel, and location. I would now like to pass over to Andy as he walks you through some of the more practical considerations that must be made when attempting to integrate digital data into location decision-making.
Thank you, Chris. I'll now show how, using InSite, we can quantify online halo. And what is the challenge we face? We want to be able to accurately measure the impact physical locations have on online sales. And by taking the approach Chris set out, we can blend market, location, and commercial data to quantify that impact. Chris covered off a lot of amazing data we use to understand the halo effect, but I realize there are some people on this session who are unaware of the tool that we use for this analysis, InSite. InSite is CACI's proprietary data enabler to help you connect your brands with people in place. So how does InSite help make smarter decisions? It simplifies complex questions. At its heart, it addresses three key questions. Who? Demographically understanding customers and what they want. Where? Geographically shows where customers are coming from or catchment coverage. And crucially, the so what questions. How much, where next, how far, who will be where? So far, I've been saying how InSite is an enabler of our data. But if you really want to start seeing value from data, then blend it. InSite seamlessly blends market, site, consumer, demographic, third-party data, and your own data. In this example, I'll be using transactional data, sales and branch data, and Acorn and retail footprint. And once this data has been blended in InSite, it supports accurate, intelligent, data-driven decisions. So what are we really going to focus on? This image shows the myriad of use cases for InSite, but for today, we're just focusing on a few. The market analysis and geographic visualization, branch performance, and performance benchmarking. InSite places data at the heart of the decisioning process. So this shows us what InSite can do to maximize the value of our data. Back to our challenge. Is online halo a complex concept and difficult to quantify accurately? At its heart, it's about understanding where your online sales are in relation to locations. The example I'm about to take you through is based on Zara, a high street brand that everyone knows. But this isn't a case study. We don't have any sales data from Zara. We are only using commercially available data. Using the transactional data Chris mentioned in his piece, we can map online sales at a granular level. If you have your own online sales data, then you would use that. We can then overlay the branch network to see the relationship between online and location. And we can drop drive time catchments around the branch network to calculate online spend around store catchments. This can then generate a drive time decay to track that relationship between online sales and location. So far, so simple. And what this simple piece of analysis has shown is a quick way to show that there is a correlation between location and online sales. Although, interestingly, there is a little uptick at the end of our drive time decay, as once you get far enough away from a store, online becomes the only channel option. But we have allocated 100% of our postcode sector's online sales to its nearest store by drive time. Is that right? How should we be allocating online sales between stores with overlapping catchments? Aren't the higher online sales where the larger or more affluent populations are? Wouldn't a better measure be to understand the market share? And finally, and most crucially, we haven't compared our findings to areas where we have no location as a benchmark, which will ultimately tell us the impact that physical location is having. CACI have developed an approach to handle these issues. We start by allocating those online sales to their appropriate store. This removes any question of double counting. We analyze the store using tailored catchments. Then using the transactional data, we can understand the market share of the online sales. And then use comparable locations where we don't have a presence to understand the uplift of that physical location. I'm now going to illustrate these steps and how we can use InSite to do this. So starting with those first 2 points, we're going to allocate sales to the most appropriate branch or store. And to do this, we use retail footprint. CACI's comparison shopping model that describes catchments for over 4,500 retail centres. I'll zoom in to a specific postcode sector and show that sector's online sales from the transactional data and how this is allocated. For this example, I'm back on the Wirral, where we saw those blurred interactions between Chester and Liverpool stores. And I'm going to look at a specific postcode sector, CH646. And for those of you without an encyclopedic knowledge of the UK postcode geography, here it is. But I know most of you on the call knew that. Our transactional data reports there is just short of £3,000 worth of Zara online sales from this sector for this example time period. So how is this allocated? Using our retail model, we distribute these sales to their most appropriate centre. As we can see from this example, Cheshire Oaks MacArthur Glen Outlet Centre takes the lion's share of the sales with 58%. But is there a store there? There's no store here. So this volume of online sales is reassigned to the general online sales volume and not store influenced sales. But the 10% and almost 9% of sales get allocated to Liverpool and Chester, respectively. This model then works this out for every postcode sector across the country. But what is the most appropriate catchment to determine that online sales have been influenced by a location? We're back on the Wirral. Look at those two locations where we have a branch, Liverpool and Chester. And based on our retail model, this is the catchment for Liverpool. and this is Chester. As you can see, they are overlapping but weighted catchments. So the proportions of the overlaps are uniquely associated to their appropriate store. This is where we can remove the double counting. But can the full retail catchment be used to associate store influenced online sales? Our findings suggest that the store's core catchment is the most appropriate catchment to use for modeling the store's influence. The core catchment is created using each centre's primary and secondary catchment. So the online sales that fall within these catchments are assigned to the store, with all other online sales being associated to the general online sales volume. This means the sector we looked at, CH646, falls out of the halo analysis now. We've now assigned the correct proportion of online sales to the correct location. The next step is to understand the online market and therefore the online market share. So we can put Zara's online sales in context and remove the population volume and demographic bias from the calculation. To do this, we use the transactional data to create a tailored basket of online sales for comparison. I have chosen a selection of brands for this comparison. I want to stress again, this is not a case study and has nothing to do with what Zara has done or would do with this data. This is for example purposes only, but all this data is commercially available through us. And using this process shown so far, we can assess Zara's online market share by branch compared to this basket of brands. And this will be able to tell us how well Zara have done in each centre versus this basket of competitors. We can also compare how well each brand is doing at postcode sector level and see in which postcode sector where they are winning or losing against their key competitors. And this is key data for marketeers. And it could be the end of the process depending on what our question is. But to answer the question we set out at the beginning, how can I measure the importance of location? We need to compare against locations where Zara are not. And for this, we turn again to retail footprint to understand the online sales of comparable centres where we do not have a store location. This is the current network of city centre Zara stores, which are the points in black, versus the city centre locations without a store, which is the points in red. It is important to compare like for like when comparing centres' behaviour. And from here, we can understand market share for the locations where there is and isn't a store. Therefore, we can accurately measure the impact of location on online sales. The data tells us that Zara's overall estate has a 43% uplift where they have a city centre store compared to where they haven't. This analysis is obviously just part of their network. But when we dig into the detail, we can see that Leicester, Brighton, Liverpool and Oxford all have between 60 and over 75% uplift, with the London West End whopping 162% uplift of market share of online sales compared to locations without a store. And conversely, this method also shows locations that haven't had a positive impact on online sales, which is just as important when considering network change. So, to sum up, my 5 key takeaways are to calculate accurate online halo using our 5-step approach. It's clear that the branch remains the most powerful way of connecting customers with brands, and that locations now have many roles to play in a holistic view of sales. It's crucial to blend the right data to accurately assess the risk of network change. And InSite enables data to provide actionable insight. For those who are keen on further reading on this topic, we will have white papers on digital and online Halo available on our website. And hot off the press is a guide to our CACI's performance lease model that Chris mentioned earlier, which is the data-led model to objectively measure store contribution. And I know I've talked about some amazing data today, and none more so than that transactional data. And for those who want to know more, please do ask myself, Sam, or Chris. But in a couple of months' time, we'll be running an in-depth webinar focusing on this data and all the fantastic insight this data provides.
All right, thanks, Andy and Chris. I really enjoyed that. That transactional data looks really interesting. I can't wait to see some more of the projects using that. And I'm looking forward to the webinar covering that in a lot more detail as well. So make sure you don't miss out on that. There's a couple of questions that have come directly to me, but feel free to put any others into the chat if you've got anything. So one that's come in is the example Andy went through was for fashion. Are you seeing other sectors bringing online Halo into their decision making as well? Chris, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that one, Sam. So yeah, the example Andy went through is for fashion. So we are doing these calculations across multiple sectors, both within retail and outside in sort of broader leisure as well. So if we take within retail, house and home is something we're doing a lot within. If you can imagine, furniture stores have that sort of showrooming effect. So being able to understand the value that placed on digital sales. So store managers are incentivized to encourage people to shop multiple channels. We're working in sports and cosmetics, again, to try and pin down how many stores these brands need to reach their customer base, regardless of channel. Interestingly, the sports one starts to move more into the idea of multi-brand partners. So actually, if they're present in another store, how can they also help contribute to the brand's online Halo as well, which we do see. And then moving across to leisure, I think it's fair to say we've all probably increased our level of delivery over the last 12 to 18 months. And many of the QSR brands, those in casual dining, are looking at trying to determine the overall opportunity in a center. If they drop down a restaurant, what the sales would be, but also those additional sales they'll generate in delivery if they weren't to have a location as well. So lots of sectors, lots of variation. And interestingly, we're seeing both the positive online Halo that Andy demonstrated and potentially some negative impacts where the store itself is providing a negative influence, something that we've seen as well in fashion, where consumers perceive the brand negatively across all channels as a result of the physical location not being up to scratch.
Great, really interesting. Okay, thanks, Chris. I've got one more question here. From what I can tell, the transactional data gets split by channel, brand, and value. How granular is it? Andy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so it is transactional data, but it is therefore, and it therefore also is coded at Acorn as well. It's available at postcode sector level, so over 10,000 parcels of land across the country, with around about summing up to around 2,500 households on average. But it means that you can cut that data by Acorn, by value, by brand, to by channel, to give you a really holistic picture of the touch points for each of those brands that are listed within there.
Fantastic, very detailed stuff then.
Absolutely.
Okay, I can't see any more questions coming into the chat, so thanks for attending the webinar, everyone. It's great to have so many of you join us today. Hope you've all found it as interesting as I have. If you do have any more questions or would like to investigate any of this further.
We do have a question.
Have you got one?
Yeah. When you talked about applying retail footprint sensor to the process of calculating online Halo, how appropriate would it be to do this for automotive representation and other industries? Hopefully that makes sense. Actually, Chris, do you want to pick that up about the other industries? Because obviously there are different catchments we have, gravity model catchments that we have for different industries.
Yeah, so I think I know the automotive sector is undergoing sort of quite a transformative process at the moment in terms of the types of locations. There's been partnerships with sites within city centres, shopping malls, etc. So I think absolutely there's relevance for a catchment model. Whether you would use specifically a retail catchment model, I think is open for debate. The point I wanted to stress before around the different sectors that we are tailoring the approach that Andy went through there to reflect the consumer behaviors that we see in certain sectors. So clearly automotive is quite different. The way you purchase a car is quite different to whether you purchase groceries or shoes and or go out to eat. So I think the idea of having a gravity model or a catchment model to ensure that you're not double counting in the way that, say, drive times or simple radii analysis would do, I think is really important. Whether that's a retail model or a more specific automotive model, I think, as I said, that's maybe open for debate. But I'd expect to see a significant amount of value in using that similar approach to try and unpick, okay, how valuable is this location? Because you've got that showrooming effect the same way that House and Home does to get people to look at the product and then just making sure they transact somewhere along that journey, whether it's online or within the dealership as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think it should. If it doesn't, or if you want to know more about what Chris has just said, then as I was saying earlier, then please just get in touch. There's lots more we can go into in more detail and lots of different projects we can look at as well. But if there's no more questions that have gone directly to either of you, don't think there has. No. Then thanks for coming to the webinar today. Enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend.